This is Fight Fans Radio.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Untethered MMA on Fight Fans Radio. It is January 31st, 2013. If you want to call the show, you can reach us at 410-988-6525, and you can reach the three hosts on Twitter. You can reach me at It's Mike Fagan. You can reach Derek at FightLinker Subo. And if you want to find out what Matt Roth is doing in San Diego, you can talk to him at MattRoth512. But Matt Roth will not be joining us, so it's just Derek and I today. Derek, how you doing?
I'm here. I got a bunch of stuff injected into my teeth yesterday, so I'm very sensitive to cold right now. But
is that semen?
No, that goes in your throat, Mike. You should know this.
Depends on how you do it, Derek.
Hey, everybody's got their own method. But no, for the first time in this millennium, I had some teeth filled, and they're a lot better at doing it than they were before. Maybe you can help me out with this, because I was on Google and Wikipedia trying to figure this out. Why the hell does a drilled tooth smell the exact same as burnt hair?
I don't know. I would imagine it has something to do with protein.
Well, I mean, one is dead skin cells and the other one is enamel. So I can't imagine that they're made out of the same base, thing. But apparently, when you immolate it, it smells the exact same, and I don't know why. Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you, Derek. I also don't go around burning my hair either, so I'm not entirely sure what burnt hair smells like.
When you smoke weed and you have a beard, you know what burnt hair smells like.
So I've been a little miserable the past couple of weeks, Derek. I'm in 3 weeks I'm going to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament, and then I'm going to compete in another one a few weeks after that. And so for the past 2 weeks, I've been walking around generally between 160, 162.
Ooh, that reminds me, I've got some cold Domino's pizza right here, and a nice regular Coca-Cola with 140 calories. So please go on.
Yeah, pizza's the worst one. But yeah, I got to get down to 155 in about a little over 2 weeks, and then I got to get down for the Chicago Open in March. I got to get down to about 151, 152. So right now I'm on pace to make the weight fine. It's just a matter of being completely miserable all the time because I can't eat what I want.
I don't know what the hell it is for amateurs out here, if it varies by weight out in Colorado, but I am going to be getting signed up with jiu-jitsu here before the end of the week or so. Now that I've gotten all my teeth and everything paid for, I know I can at least afford the first couple of months, whatever happens, so I'm getting set up. But I walk around at about $196, $197 most of the time, and I've been at 185 just walking around without actually sweating anything out. But I don't know what would be the most comfortable for me. Tournaments are weird for me anyway. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it depends tournament to tournament. The tournament coming up in February, it's called Combat Corner. It's actually up in Milwaukee. They let you weigh in the day before, and they do gi and no gi, so you don't have to weigh in with the gi on, which is great. I can just make 155, no problem. But the Chicago Open, they make you weigh in with the gi on.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. That sucks.
And I have the weight limit's actually 154, I believe. So, add a few pounds for the gi. Means I have to get down to like 150, 151-ish, which I've done before, and it's a bitch. But it helps, too, that I've been dieting.
How tall are you?
I am a shade under 6 foot. I'm like a quarter inch under.
So you're 5'11".
I'm closer to 6 foot.
Oh, Mike, this is like I'm 3.5.
I'll put it this way: if I'm on a dating site, I list myself as 6 foot.
Attaboy. There you go. My driver's license still says 6'2" because that's how tall I was when I was 16. But I am in fact 6'3".
Let me see what my driver's license says. I have myself listed at 5'11" on my driver's license.
There you go.
And
160
pounds.
And what? How much?
160 pounds.
Fucking rippling steel.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. I'm willing to compete, but one of the first things my coaches told me is like, practice however you want, but when you get in a tournament, you're going to want to go with your strong hand forward, which is my right hand, and that's not how I practice. So I don't, if everybody else is doing that and I'm not, I'm going to be at a disadvantage right there. But that feels so alien to me to be a wrestler with your power hand forward. It's weird.
I go with my power hand forward.
My foot doesn't feel like it should be in front of my left foot feels like it should be in front.
Yeah, well, my instructor, did MMA for a while, so he got used to leading with his left foot, and now that's just the way he naturally feels. I mean, if you feel more comfortable, leading left, I wouldn't.
I just feel like your power foot, your most powerful leg, should be in the back to either catch somebody coming at you or to drive forward on a takedown attempt.
Yeah, but when you're driving forward on a takedown, you want to you get that front lead leg. If you're shooting a double, you get it in between your opponent's legs, and then you drive from there. So, But like I said, I mean, if you feel more comfortable shooting the other way or just standing the other way, I wouldn't get too goofed up about it. Just like anything in jiu-jitsu, if you feel comfortable, once you get in a tournament, you're just going to fall back on the stuff that you know. So you shouldn't try to do anything crazy. So
I'm just going to stall for like 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Get yourself DQ'd.
Yeah. You didn't beat me, the ref did.
All right, well, let's talk UFC on Fox 6, the show that was this Saturday. Great show. I thought it was, top to bottom, pretty solid.
I was a little optimistic with my ratings prediction, but I believe you were a little pessimistic with yours.
I want to say that I was pegging it between 3.8 and 3.9, but I thought that the sweet spot was between that and like 4.1, 4.2. It ended up at 4.2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and the peak was at 5, so that number wasn't crazy out of thin air for me. It turned out to be the third most viewed Fox card as opposed to the second, which is what I thought it was going to be. But it did beat the BJ, Rory McDonald, etc. card from a little bit ago.
And the big thing for them going forward in terms of ratings is real. I mean, to me, it's not huge. I would expect there to be a little bit of a drop in the spring and summer show, but it is going to be interesting to see how they hold up with better matchmaking than they did last year, but without the NFL to really push it. So that'll be an interesting game to play come then. But one thing I was thinking about that I just posted on Twitter. I compared Johnson and Dodson's fight on Fox to the Quentin Rampage Jackson Dan Henderson title fight that went live on Spike at UFC 75.
That's a horrible comparison, but go ahead.
Well, the comparison is that to me both are great, all-time great fights, and I'm wondering if Johnson Dodson gets sort of forgotten like Jackson Henderson does, because Jackson Henderson, when you talk about people's favorite fights or their all-time great fight lists, that fight just doesn't seem to come up as often as it should.
Well, I also thoroughly enjoy that fight, but you and I enjoy wrestling and kind of historical relevance and storylines. Like that was the Pride Unification bout, Dan's first one that was right after the purchase. I think it was the most watched fight in American MMA history there for a while, most watched fight in America on TV until Kimbo and everyone came along. But it didn't have any knockdowns, if I remember correctly, no violent punches being landed. This fight had that. And I think that by itself, the fact that you had this really significant comeback, whereas Jackson Henderson was mostly Jackson just out wrestling him for the duration. I think that the difference in how those fights played out will make a little bit of a difference. People forget everything. People if you ask somebody to describe what happened in Silva versus Sonnen 1, they're going to have trouble doing it, most people. So it's just a matter of, not remembering certain moments. All that happens. I'm sure it'll happen to this fight too, but Both those guys exceeded my expectations. That fight was better than I thought it was going to be, especially going to a decision like that.
Well, and it's, I bring this up a lot. It was another example of a 5-round fight being far superior to 3 rounds. If that was a 3-round fight, it would still been a nice, fun fight. But it was one that Dodson either would have won in a fight that he outperformed what people expected of him, or it would be a fight kind of like the Guida-Hioki fight on this card that Johnson wins because he narrowly took 2 rounds while Dodson dominated the second.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I would have been okay with the draw in this fight. Because
I would have too. It seemed like everyone sort of had Johnson scored the fight for Johnson at the end. I also did, but it was close enough to me that you could have given Dodson 2 rounds and given him a 10-8. And
and I'm stingy with my 10-8s. You know how much of a dick I am with my 10-8s, but I kind of look at it in the boxing realm, which is that if you piece a guy up on the feet, but you get knocked down if he lands a clean one and knocks you on your ass, I think that's a 10-9 for the guy who lands the knockdown. So if you can land 2 solid knockdowns in a round, which really doesn't happen that often, the last time I can really remember it happening and the round didn't end was Maynard versus Edgar, the second one. That it's a rare occurrence, but when it does happen, there are 2 clean knockdowns in a round. I think you go with the boxing model and assign a 10-8 there.
A couple of things. According to Fight Metric, Jackson and Henderson, there was a knockdown scored in the 4th for Rampage.
May have been a slip or something. I don't remember it. You don't remember any big bombs from that fight, do you?
I do remember a sequence at the end of the fight where
10 seconds left, clap, and they start.
And Jackson sort of kind of took it to Henderson at the end. Fight Metric also only credited Dodson with 1 knockdown in round 2. And it's interesting if you look at the striking stats here. I'll give you the significant strike stats. Johnson 11, Dodson 9 in round 1, 15-15 apiece in round 2. 21-14 for Johnson in the 3rd, 30-10 for Johnson in the 4th, and then 50-9 in the 5th for Johnson. And that was one of the most impressive things for me in this fight was Johnson kind of weathering a storm early, and also, it was a pretty close fight up and through the 3rd, and then just kind of pulling away with it in the 4th and 5th. And in that 5th round, his work in the clinch and his work around Dodson putting his hand on and off the mat was one of the best things I've ever seen in MMA.
I think it would. I was amazed by the creativity of the fight, and I think that will be remembered far beyond anything else. The jumping kind of guard in the corner and using the cage with his back to land those elbows. Some of the different strikes that were even attempted, let alone landed. That will be memorable more than I think a Henderson versus Jackson will be. Not because of quality, but because of novelty. This makes me want to purchase that UFC deal with the camera angles and other options, because I bet the 5 minutes of commentary in Demetrius Johnson's corner from the 1st to the 2nd and then on to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, like you said, when not only did he even the score, he began to pull away, as Fight Metric kind of showed there. Although I'm wondering, as a Fight Metric scorer, how many knockdowns you would have given Dodson for the 2nd round.
I would have to rewatch. I only trained on the Fight Metric system a little bit way back in the day, and I only sort of know the criteria. But
I had 2 tweets during that round, and one was ooh, and the other one was double ooh, and I'm pretty sure both were knockdowns.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch to kind of.
But what I was saying is, I bet the 5 minutes of commentary from that corner cam, which you do have access to with the UFC pay-per-view deal if you buy it online and stream it. If you can go back and do that, I would be really fascinated to hear not only his corner kind of calming him down and reassuring him after the first couple, but what they advised him as far as changing up his game plan, when to time the takedown attempts, when to put it against the cage, when to strike, when to feint, and how that progressed throughout the fight, because he's got an amazing camp that prepared him well for that fight. He's obviously got, sponsors that have more money than God if he needs it. I think that, and I love Mighty Mouse. We predicted him. I think you and I picked him to win last week. And he's been making me look smart since I saw him in person 3 years ago.
The other big story going into the fight was Quentin Jackson and his last fight in the UFC.
Just like Tito Ortiz's last fight in the UFC was against Lyoto Machida.
Right. I have.
What mind are you of on that? What do you think? What is Rampage's next paying gig?
I'm not sure what his next gig is. I'm not sure that he's gone from the UFC forever. Although I think if he goes to another organization and takes a couple bad losses, you could pretty much sign that deal off. I don't buy into the fact that he's definitely 100% never coming back. For the same reason that you never write off any combat sport athlete, retiring or staying away from a business opportunity. Tito being one of the best examples. But one thing that I've, from the handful of people that I've talked about the fight was Jackson looked a lot better than I think most people expected him to.
Well, I think that was also a factor of just people thinking that Teixeira was just going to absolutely Mack truck him. Rampage it's never been a question of a questionable jaw for Rampage or anything like that. Like, he gets dropped quickly and finished. So I wasn't surprised that Teixeira couldn't do that in the first. I think that a little bit of the wheels they're not off the Teixeira hype train, but they're wobbling a little bit. It was a less than dominant performance by him. I think we saw two tired guys in the third round as Rampage was a little worse off. And, Dana doesn't want to lose Rampage. Dana didn't want to lose Dan Henderson. It's not a question of, fuck you, I don't want you to work for me, because as long as we can make money off each other, we'll figure out a way to make it work. Turns out that was the case between Dana and Randy for years and years, and that kind of came out today a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But as far as Rampage goes, he can make more money with the UFC than he can doing anything else. And, if he wants to go to K1 and make $30,000 that he never gets, go ahead. If he wants to go to Bellator and fight Christian Mpumbu in front of 200,000 people, that's up to you. But if he's smart, he'll do what Tito did. He'll get healthy, maybe have a surgery he's been waiting on, something like that. Wait about a year, and then come back and say, I'm ready for another title run. I'm the best I've ever been, and make some more money.
Yeah, and you're talking about Teixeira, sort of the hype train sort of losing his luster. I tweeted during the fight, probably in the middle of the third, that this isn't the guy that's going to beat John Jones.
You don't know that.
Well, I can say that if there was a line set right now on Jones Teixeira, it'd be -500 or 600 for Jones.
I think it were like 4, probably. If it was 5, it'd move to 4 because people would fucking retard hump Teixeira at like +550 in that fight.
The thing for me with Teixeira is, if this was Glover Teixeira at 28 and he beat Quentin Jackson like this, there's an argument to be made there that, he might improve coming into this next fight. He might, learn from the experience. But, Teixeira is about the same age as Jackson. He's 33, 34.
Sure. Well, yeah, but go ahead.
Even if he got the next shot against Jones, which I don't think is, I would assume isn't going to be the next step for Zuffa. By the time he gets a shot at Jones, he might be 35. Maybe even 36, assuming he runs through a couple of guys that I don't think he beats Rashad Evans. I don't think he beats Lyoto Machida. I think the people that were touting this guy as the next big thing at 205, after two fights over guys that are kind of middle of the road at 205, I think it took a bigger hit than you might be letting on.
Well, we've made fun of Glover Teixeira's record on this show and the paucity of difficult opponents on it. But as part of that means that his 34 years old is a lot different than Rampage Jackson's or Fedor Emelianenko's 34 years old. He hasn't had wars. He hasn't had, a career in Japan where it was, take a shot of codeine in your ass and then get out there and fight. It wasn't. And Rampage has talked about that before, how they didn't have doctors there. They had to all take care of all that shit themselves. Glover's going to be a lot less battle-worn and have a lot more juice left in the tank versus Rampage. Part of the reason that Randy was able to go until he was 46 is he didn't start fighting until he was about, 34, 35. whereas Rampage has been doing it since he was in his 20s, young 20s, and doing it against some of the best in the world, even back in 04 and 05. I think because of that, I can't really put them on the same plane, even though I look at Teixeira as a relatively fresh fighter for his age because of how shitty his resume is.
Yeah, I'm looking up his record right now. He has 22 fights, so it's not like, obviously.
But his best win is Rico Rodriguez, like before.
Right, yeah,
Rampage. And that means that Rico Rodriguez was his toughest opponent up until then.
Right, and going through his record, he has 1, 2, 3, and then this fight with Jackson makes 4 fights that wins the distance. And most of these guys he put out in the first round. Yeah, my thing is it's just that level of jump in skill, you're not going to see it like you would when, say, John Jones was coming up. Each fight, he noticeably improved. I think what you have with Teixeira is what you have at this point. His skill set isn't going to really change wildly. He's not going to get really much better in any area. And if it takes him a year or 2 years to get a title shot, that's just a year or 2 more years on his body.
The whole point of this fight is that Teixeira's next fight will be for the number 1 contender spot, and I believe it should be against Alexander Gustafsson. You mentioned Rashad Evans, you mentioned Lyoto Machida, and they may well be able to beat Glover Teixeira in a fight. They probably would, but they've had their turn. And while Lyoto was announced after, the night with Lyoto and Shogun because he looked good against Ryan Bader, you could tell they didn't want to do that. I'd be happy to see Teixeira fight Gustafsson. I think that's a really competitive fight, and I think the winner has...
I was just going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a super competitive fight. I would pick Gustafsson just because... while I think he's a young 34, he sure as shit isn't Alexander Gustafsson level of fresh and bouncy and able to incorporate new things into his game plan like you were talking about. You can kind of game plan to share now. There's enough tape on him, whereas Gustafsson can come out and look different in every other fight. So I would pick Gustafsson in that fight, and I think him versus Jones is fascinating. It'd be, it's going to be 2 fucking power forwards out there going at it.
How would you look at Teixeira fighting Gegard Mousasi?
Oh, he'd destroy him.
That's interesting. I don't think he would destroy him.
Why would you? What has Gegard Mousasi done to deserve fighting a legitimate top 10 fighter now? Perhaps even top 6-ish.
He's fighting Gustafsson.
That's retarded. I did not know that.
They're fighting in I think April or May in Sweden.
Okay, well, it's in Sweden, so it's clearly a showcase for Gustafsson. I'm sure Musasi's a name out there, too, because he was the Golden Glory and everything. But they want Gustafsson to win that fight, and they picked themselves a good opponent to guarantee that outcome. I wouldn't bet Mousasi plus 400 in that fight.
Wow. I'm gonna.
Would you?
I might. 400
plus 400.
Let's see if there's a lineup on it yet. Let's see. Gustafsson. No, there's no line.
It'll probably be plus 325 because everyone's stupid.
Going down a little bit on the card here. I'm a little worried about bringing it up, but Derek, your boy, got embarrassed.
It was not a stellar showing. I underrated Anthony Pettis' striking, clearly. Everybody had been telling me he's one of the best in MMA, if not the best in MMA. I said, hold your horses. I remember him losing to Clay Guida like a year and a half ago. But he is, and he's deadly accurate, more power than I thought he'd have. Didn't like the Cerrone game plan again. Boxing with better boxers doesn't really work out for anybody, especially when you have leg kicks at your disposal. I think he threw one the whole fight. And though he was getting pressured and wasn't able to really maintain his range, he could have still thrown more leg kicks, and I don't know why he didn't. But I still don't think...
So what you're saying is that Donald wasn't following the game plan?
That was my theory during the Diaz fight, and he came out right after the Diaz fight and said, yep, I was stupid. I let my emotions get the best of me. I just tossed the game plan out of the window and tried to beat his ass. I didn't get that same sense of aggression here, but it seemed to me like he wanted to prove a point with his hands. That's the impression that I get. I got nothing to back that up, no inside sources or anything, but that's how I feel about it. I also feel like we haven't seen his ceiling yet. I think that he will come back from this like he did the Diaz fight. He won a couple fights after that. I think we'll see him win more fights, win more awards, and I think he'll get better as a result. I don't think that we've seen his peak yet.
And then the opener on Fox, Ricardo Lamas, really putting a nice beating on Eric Koch.
Surprising.
He's probably got to be the next guy in line to fight either Aldo or Edgar, assuming that they don't draw and have a rematch.
Look, here's what you need to do if you're the UFC. When you announce that somebody's going to fight the champ, just lock them in a room for like 3 months until that fight happens. Because from fucking Josh Grisby to Eric Koch, if you get mentioned in the same breath as Jose Aldo, you're going to get shit kicked in your next fight. Same thing with Hatsu Hioki. If you get mentioned as a possible contender to Aldo, you're done. So, like I said, if you're going to do it, you announce the fight, you say, here's when it's going to be, and you just send them to an island until then.
And speaking of Hatsuyoki, probably the most controversial decision on the card, and definitely on the undercard or the prelims. How did you score Guida and Hioki? First off,
I scored it 29-28 Guida.
I think we can both agree that 30-27 is
insane. It makes no sense. I love the defense of it. I don't think the fact that they're Facebook friends or whatever. Like, if you're Facebook friends with a fighter on Facebook, they don't fucking know who you are. You're just within that 5,000 person limit and got in there before that. So there's no connection there or anything like that.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, though. There might not be any impropriety going on, and there might not be a conflict of interest, but there is the perception of it, and it's something that it's common sense. You should be, if you're an official for a commission, probably you should keep that stuff separate.
Well, first, I appreciate an official for the commission, that a judge, addressing it as opposed to just maintaining silence and saying, well, I'm not going to get fired, so fuck you, which is basically what not saying anything says. But you can kind of see the argument where he says, look, there were 3 scorecards on this fight. One was 3-0 for Guida, one was 2-1 for Guida, and one was 2-1 for Hioki. Now, you might disagree with mine. I thought all 3 rounds were really close. I gave them all to him barely. But you also think that the decision itself is bullshit, and there's a whole other judge here, and he thought my scorecard was closer to the right thing than the other guys.
I wasn't paying attention, so I don't know if you're waiting for me to respond to something.
Well, I'm saying that the argument is you might think my scorecard was bullshit, but the other judge thought I was closer to being right than what you think. So where does that put you?
Well, I don't think that a Guida card is bullshit. I think it's wrong. But, basically what happened in the fight, and in rounds 2 and 3, I was thinking, Hioki is going to lose this fight because he's content to play on the bottom. I thought he did enough in at least, I think it was the second round where he landed that big kick at the, with 30 seconds left or whatever it was. I thought he did enough in that round to win it, just because Guida's offense was so inept on top. Fight Metric, I believe, scored him having 4 or 5 strikes total in rounds 2 and 3 separately. But, during rounds 2 and 3, I was thinking, Hioki's apparently content losing this fight on his back because he's, he is attacking and he's being aggressive, but he's showing no real urgency to get out of it unless, Guida had him in a weird spot up against the cage. So, I don't think Guida won the fight, but...
Do you know who does think Guida won the fight?
Oh, boy.
Hatsu Hioki.
Yeah?
Yeah, he came right out and he said, look, quit bitching about the scorecards. I thought that I did more damage, but I lost because he was on top more. And if you're on top and you stop me from getting submissions on the bottom, it's my job to either get out of the bottom or hit a fucking submission. You have to do one or the other. And if you don't, you're going to lose the round.
Are you banging on your desk?
Damn right I am. I'm fucking emphasizing my point. I'm glad you noticed.
And
he said it. I love Hatsuyogi because he said it. He said, if you're on the bottom, can't stay there. And if you do stay there, then you better have the other guy tapping on you because that's the only way you're going to win.
The last thing I want to touch on before we move on to the card coming up, 2 guys on the prelims that I thought looked great. The first being TJ Grant, which is an obvious one, just really put a superior beating on Matt Wyman. And then I also thought in the fight before Hioki Guida, Pascal Kraus, I don't know what his ceiling is at this point. I don't know if he's really anything more than a sort of middle-of-the-road welterweight, but he looked great, and he looked just really technical against Mike Stumpf. And so those are 2 guys that I'm going to be looking forward to watching fight next.
Yeah, Kraus has always been an intriguing guy. He's always physically, you always felt like he could do it, but he is getting better. He's better than he was when you first saw him, and that's been impressive. I don't know why you got to fucking bring up Matt Wyman and bring a frown to my face. It wasn't a great night for Colorado guys, but Grant looked like a beast. And when after that whole who was it that he fought? Was it Keith Burns or some shit like that? Like the Fire Burns, or was it Anthony Johnson? He's fought some welterweights back in the day where I just didn't think he had it, but he looked great.
Grant's fought he fought Chonin, Dong Hyun Kim, Kevin Burns, Johnny Hendricks, Julio Polino, and Ricardo Almeida.
Yeah, I think he either did the Burns fight end in a knockout with a head kick?
He knocked out. I don't know if it was a head kick, but he knocked out Burns. Yeah.
Yeah, he knocked out Burns, and then Dong Hyun Kim just dominated him. And after that, I was like, okay. And I still love Dong Hyun Kim. I still want to see him come back.
Burns was after the Kim fight. The Kim fight took place at UFC 100.
Okay, I really want to see Dong Hyun Kim against Damian Maia again, and Damian Maia is not allowed to use black voodoo magic. Because that's an absolutely fascinating fight if they're both healthy with ligaments that aren't shredded and they get their hands on each other.
Yeah. The other thing about Grant, since dropping down to lightweight, he's beaten Shane Roller, Carlo Prater, Evan Dunham, and Matt Wyman, and that's the beginnings of a pretty solid lightweight career.
That is a nice run to begin. He should definitely be in line for like a top 10 opponent. Maybe put him against like a Gallard and see if he can pass that particular gatekeeper. Because there's like 4 gates at lightweight now. You have to pass the striking one, then there's a wrestling one, there's a jiu-jitsu one, and then there's like an everything one. And then you get to the boss level. It's got to be a shitty division to try to climb up in.
Yeah.
And Donald passed most of those tests. It's just the elite level strikers that have fucking, not giving him the best time.
Right. Speaking of UFC 100, UFC 156 might be the most stacked show since UFC 100.
Ooh, that is a bold statement.
I mean, first of all, the 5 fights in the main pay-per-view card all could headline shows on their own. Maybe not pay-per-views, but
listen to Mike Fagan sucking the UFC's dick. Oh my goodness!
I've been saying on Twitter the past few weeks, Derek, that the run of UFC cards the next couple months is a really good run. There's that London show on Fuel that I think is a little whatever, but there's a couple just banging shows, and this one, I mean, I get excited for big fights, but this is one of those cards that I'm just sort of pumped for top to bottom. And then if you go on the prelims on FX, Jay Heron and Tyrone Woodley is a great fight, and then Gleason Tebow and Evan Dunham also a great fight. Both of those, I think, are undercard pay-per-view fights on a normal show. Well, let's start.
I love Gleason Tebow. I just need to say that again because I always do.
Let's start with the main event, Aldo and Edgar.
I'm sorry. Is there someone on the preliminary card whose name is actually Dustin Kimura?
There is.
Holy shit. He's the one person without a Wikipedia page. If you don't have a Wikipedia page and you're in the UFC, get your manager on it. Fucking edit that shit.
Aldo and Edgar, being billed as a super fight, and I'm not sure if that is the best representation of it, but at the same time, probably one of the fights that I'm most looking forward to or have been looking forward to over the past few months. I've been talking to some people about it, and it's really interesting kind of getting people's thoughts on who they think is going to win the fight. I think Aldo has got to be the pick just through his dominance, but I mean, Frank Edgar might be the best fighter he's fought.
I think that you can pretty much say that pretty safely. I think his only competition would be Chad Mendes.
I mean, he fought Faber when Faber was still at his peak.
I would, and Faber was a really, really good fighter, but I think that Chad Mendes would kick Faber's ass. And I think he probably would have back then, too.
I mean, yeah, the Faber, yeah, probably. Mendes, yeah, I would.
So, yeah, but either way, I think it's safe to say that Frankie is better than both of those guys.
How do you...
Frankie beat BJ Penn 2 times.
Well,
fought him for 10 rounds without getting dropped on his ass or even put in a submission attempt.
Yeah. That's
my God.
That is impressive. And, I thought he won the last fight against Ben Henderson.
So did I, and I was fucking there.
That's what makes this fight so interesting to me, because really Jose's not really shown any weaknesses. People like to point out to the 5th round against Mark Hominick, but...
Yeah, the flu. That's a weakness.
As long as you...
He has a weakness to viruses.
As long as you buy into the fact that he was sick going into the fight,
I do because he hasn't looked like that against anybody since, and it turns out Mark Hominick was not that guy. That was going to push Jose Aldo to his limit if Jose Aldo was healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if you look at their trajectory since that fight, I think I don't think it exposed Aldo as much as it just caught him on a bad night. And so I could totally see Aldo just kind of buzzsawing through Edgar, but then again, Edgar's like you said, Edgar's a guy who even when it gets beat up.
Go ahead.
So that equalizer, he has the wrestling equalizer. And Aldo's shown that he can kind of shrug guys off, but again, he hasn't fought a guy like Frank Edgar.
No, he hasn't fought anybody like Frank Edgar that's going to really not only work for that takedown, but time it perfectly. Edgar and Evans, I think, are the two best in MMA at knowing when to shoot and how to punch and feint and work to get that leg isolated and then go from there. It's going to be a different word for Aldo. Of course, he's the pick, but that only makes it more intriguing because when Frankie Edgar is an underdog, as he was, 3 back-to-back fights as a champion, which I don't think we'll ever see again, that the belt holder has a plus next to his name on the betting lines over and over again. The second BJ fight, the Maynard fight, and then the Maynard rematch, and he was an underdog in all of those. So, this is where he thrives, when nobody believes in him and everybody's just saying it's going to be a coronation. It's going to be an awesome fight. I love the smorgasbord that you get on this main card because you're getting 5 different weight classes. You got a number 1 contenders fight that's right in the middle of the goddamn thing. I don't know if it's number 1 contenders. I don't know if Bigfoot gets the title shot if he beats Overeem, but hell, maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it. I didn't think about that. It is a nice little smorgasbord of UFC action. In the co-main, we were talking about him a little just a second ago. Rashad Evans and Little Nogueira, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira.
I'll pick him over Mousasi too.
Little Nogueira?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would.
You like Mousasi.
I do like Mousasi.
A lot of people that I respect otherwise are really big fans of Gegard Mousasi. Is his best win Babalu?
It might be, unless
Keith Jardine, baby, split decision.
Well, he should have won that fight going away.
Well, he fouled him. You can't foul people. If you foul people, you lose a point.
Well, he should have won it anyway. I mean, it shouldn't have. Whatever.
It shouldn't have gone to decision. Okay, he couldn't finish Keith Jardine.
Well, that's a fair point.
The ghost of Keith Jardine.
Really, for me, no reason to think that Rashad doesn't just pull his typical fight out and sort of just beat up Little Nogueira for 3 rounds.
Well, the only thing that I can say, to be fair, with common opponents, they both did the exact same thing to Tito Ortiz.
Okay.
They both just destroyed him and made him almost tap, but not quite tap. They TKO'd him with body shots in the first round. So I don't think Little Nogueira is over the hill. I think people remember that Jason Brill's fight, and since then they're just he doesn't have it anymore. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not willing to give up on the Nogueiras just yet.
Well, I'm gonna say this: Phil Davis, decision loss. Ryan Bader, decision loss. Jason Brill's decision split win, but he probably should have lost that fight.
I don't know if he probably should have lost that fight. I felt that way for a little bit too, but there's that's one of those fights where there are 2 swing rounds, and you can make an argument either way. The only problem is that Brills looked a lot better than anybody else thought he would, and he almost had that goddamn submission. If he finishes it, there's no argument. But I don't think that the Nogueiras are done. I like Rashad in the fight, clearly, but the guys you mentioned, his decision losses, elite level wrestlers, of which Gegard Mousasi is not.
Right, but that Rashad Evans is. And if you go back, first of all, Nogueira's...
I'll pick Evans against anybody in the world that's not named John Jones. Yeah. I'll pick Evans against Gustafson. I'll pick Evans against Teixeira. I'll pick Evans again. What about an Evans-Machida rematch? See, you got to ask that question. You can't just say he's number 2 for life when you remember the stanky leg.
The other thing, too, about Nogueira, he's 36, and his last victory...
Now, who's the number 2 light heavyweight in the world? Bitch, aren't you?
No, I think it's probably Rashad. Although I think there's probably people that would say Dan Henderson. We keep forgetting about Dan Henderson, too. Probably because he's been out for a while.
He's old and hurt. That's why that makes people forget about you.
And Nogueira's last win over an elite opponent was Alistair Overeem, and conveniently enough, Alistair Overeem is next on the show. Overeem against Antonio Bigfoot Silva in what is ostensibly a number one contender fight for Overeem.
For Overeem. I was stupid 5 minutes ago. They're not going to do Silva Velasquez 2 anytime soon.
Yeah.
Silva Dos Santos might be fun, though. If Silva could win this and beat Dos Santos.
I don't think he can beat Dos Santos, and I don't think he can beat Overeem either.
Probably not.
I think, I think it's going to be a case where Overeem is just a better athlete, a better kickboxer, and to me, unless Silva can get him down and stay on top and kind of wear him out in the first round, he's going to be in a lot of trouble for the rest of the fight.
What this is going to come down to is quality of pharmacists, okay? Because both of these guys had their issues before, and Silva's defense was one of the greatest of all time, which is, I have acromegaly, and if I take this steroid, I will die.
You mean if you don't take the steroid?
No, if I take this steroid. Because
okay.
His pituitary gland is going nuts. That's why he has the jack-o'-lantern jaw. And that's why he's as big. I shit you not. It's a common trait when you get that big fucking jaw. That's a thing. I believe I'm pronouncing it right, acromegaly. I can spell it for you later on in comments and everything, but it's the reason George Mirasan kind of had the same facial structure. That huge guy that was in the Billy Crystal movie, he played for the Washington Bullets back when they were, fucking had their name that fit the town. So that was one of the all-time great steroid defenses. But we got to see Overeem piss clean. It's going to be in Nevada, so if they can get him, they're going to get him. They've already, they're going to try their asses off. And I'm also going to pick Overeem. I think that whoever wins, or actually, if Overeem wins, which I'm predicting, then I think Cain Velasquez is going to put him on his head. I'm going to bet that fight for Cain Velasquez.
Yeah, I'm going to too. I've seen a lot of people say that Overeem is right up there with Dos Santos and Velasquez. I think it's an interesting fight for Dos Santos. I think he can. I think he presents a lot of problems for Dos Santos, being a kickboxer and Dos Santos being a boxer. But I still think Cain's just a bad matchup for a lot of guys at heavyweight. Our friend Mookie on Twitter of Bloody Elbow fame pointing out that Edgar might have been the favorite in the rematch with Maynard or the third fight with Maynard. And according to Best Fight Odds, you could get both guys at underdog numbers and at favorite numbers. So depending on where you were shopping. Where
do you think that line moves to? Where do you think it's going to settle at? Because I think there's going to be a stupid amount of money thrown at Overeem when people get a look at him in this fight. And I'll probably be able to get Cain at almost even.
I don't think you're going to be able to get Cain at even. I think his performance against Dos Santos was so dominant that I just don't think you're going to see people sleeping on him again.
What if Overeem liver kicks Silva and he just becomes known as the liver kick guy? It's like Cain Velasquez can't defend the liver kick.
I imagine you're going to see something like, and obviously this depends too on the performance. If Overeem goes out there and kind of squeaks by a decision against Silva, you're going to get a different line. But assuming he can go out there and kind of handedly take the fight, I think you're going to see something like Velasquez anywhere between minus 175 and minus 200. I think that's where I kind of expect that line to open.
Now, they haven't announced. I remember rumblings that Werdum was going to be getting a title shot, but it doesn't seem that has been announced anywhere or signed or anything like that. They're probably waiting for the outcome of this fight.
I believe because he's coaching with Big Nogueira in the new Tough Brazil, I think.
Yeah, they're not going to fight each other, right?
I thought they were.
If they do, that's awesome. But it may be Brazilian guys either they're really really good friends or they want to kill each other. I can't imagine them coaching a show and then fighting.
I'm checking out Sherdog. They will be serving as coaches. And they would square off in a fight. I think what the argument was, or not the argument, but the.
Yeah, I don't see it anywhere on the Wikipedia. I don't know if it's been added. They just don't have any finals for the UFC Tough Brazil or anything. Yeah,
I think the idea was, though, that if Werdum won, he would get the shot after Overeem, assuming Overeem got the next shot. But,
Hell, if Nogueira wins, I would be okay with giving it to him, too. That's a hell of a winning streak if he can pull that off.
Yeah. the welterweight bout on the main card, John Fitch and Damian Maia. Again, just like this is a fight that it's just such a great bit of matchmaking, and it could end up being a really weird, boring fight if it ends up being some sort of weird kickboxing match. But I'm hoping, and I have a feeling, we're going to see a lot of groundwork here, and I think that's going to be just a ton of fun.
I do too. I thought the Rick Story Damian Maia fight was going to be a lot more interesting, but Rick Story had nothing for Damian Maia. John Fitch will. He's not going to get subbed, that quickly by a neck crank with a broken nose a minute and a half into the first. And part of me is leaning towards Maia because I love John Fitch, and I think that he's a hell of a fighter. He has this like $10,000 guarantee out there to like any black belt in jiu-jitsu. Like, come to my gym. I'll give you my back and you won't be able to choke me out. It's like this long-standing thing. I don't think he's had to pay it off yet. But I think that that's going to get him in trouble because Damian Maia is just not somebody that you fuck with on the ground. And that's where this is going. So, if John Fitch can do it, he'll completely renew. I respect both these guys. John Fitch has been one of my favorites for a long time. I just think that Maia is at his right weight class. His striking has gotten so much better since Nate Marquardt melted his face in 20 seconds 3 years ago. Maia's gotten a lot better as a fighter, and I think that this is kind of his time to break through. He's going to have a little better of a rear naked choke than Eric Silva does.
So you like Maia in the fight?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I love John Fitch, and that nothing in the world would surprise me about John Fitch winning. But I don't know. It's a close call either way, but I would lean with Maia.
Interesting. The betting lines have Fitch as a 2-1 favorite, and I as much as I love Maia, I love both of them, but I love Maia as well. And I just ultimately I think this is sort of a bad style matchup for him because I think Fitch is a guy who can put Maia on his back and, neutralize the top game or the bottom game for Maia.
That's the question. I don't know if anybody in the world can neutralize Maia's bottom game. I've never seen it done.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing, too, is I think even if Maia gets Fitch's back, it's still tough to choke out John Fitch.
Oh, my God. It might be the hardest thing to do in the world, but who's got better rear naked chokes than Damian? It's the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, and in that collision, I go with the force.
Well, I'll take the immovable object.
No, like I said, it's 50-50. I'm not going to talk any shit on you. They're both completely legitimate things to look at.
And then the last fight we'll talk about in the card before we move on, Joseph Benavidez and Ian McCall in sort of the consolation bracket of the flyweight tournament. And interestingly, I imagine whoever wins here is going to get the shot against Demetrius Johnson.
And that's why what you said earlier is so smart, because you said that any one of these fights could headline it. We've got Mookie over at Bloody Elbow telling us that 9 out of the 10 guys have been in a headlining fight before. And it's a number one contender spot, absolutely. Flyweight is still taking a little bit of time to get together. We've heard rumblings this week about a possible strawweight division and the possibility of Henry Cejudo getting involved in MMA, taking a couple fights in smaller organizations before the UFC gets that up and rolling. And man, the potential of a real life, wrestling gold medalist coming in his athletic prime into MMA. A lot of people have been waiting for Jordan Burroughs. It looks like he's going to do the Olympics one more time and then decide. But if we can get Henry Cejudo in, between his cultural relevance and his actual athletic relevance on the world stage, that would be a coup for the UFC.
I imagine Cejudo would fight at flyweight. I don't think he would fight at a strawweight. He wrestled at the Olympics at 121, so I imagine he would just fight at 125.
That would be cool too. And if that's the case, then it's nice that the division already has, that fight that happened last week might be the best thing in the world for him, because now his opponent's going to have some name value as well.
Yeah, and I think the best thing for the UFC to do would just be to sign him right now and kind of farm him out to the regional promotions, get him some experience, and then bring him in, give him 4 or 5, 6 fights, and then bring him in and sort of try to build him up. And then by that point, hopefully, you have a deeper division instead of the 8 guys that they have signed right now.
And that's cool. It's just if you do that, it kind of blows up the contract structure in as much as it would have to be a unique contract that says you're signed with us, but you're not exclusive because you're fighting with other organizations. When they let guys go, like when Cote got cut, they told him, if you win a couple, we'll bring you back. But there was no contract stating that if I win 2 fights, then da-da-da-da. I think it's going to remain unofficial in that capacity, and it'll just be, hey, Henry, give us a call when you're ready, and we'll give you a bunch of money.
See, I think the UFC could sign some sort of developmental deal with him. I don't know
That's just a whole new thing. It's a whole new contract. And if you're going to do it, you don't do it with the most expensive guy in the world to start out with.
Well, do you know he's going to be expensive? I mean, I think I think it'd be a great thing for Zuffa too, because it would allow them to sign prospects that might otherwise sign with Bellator before they sign with Bellator, without having to put them on UFC cards before they're ready. If you could get Cejudo, sign him to a deal where you get 5-6 fights outside of the organization. We get a right to refuse if we don't like a matchup for you, but we own your rights once that period.
If there's any luck in the world, and if managers begin to collectively realize that Bellator contracts leave you powerless for a longer time in the future than they expected, then these prospects aren't going to be signing with Bellator. If there's any justice in what's happening to Eddie Alvarez right now, it's that we're going to see less and less quality fighters that are young going to Bellator.
Before we move on, who are you taking in Benavidez, McCall?
I will take Benavidez. I was surprised when he lost, although I love Johnson. 125 is pretty stacked at that upper echelon. All these guys are bouncing off each other, and Ian McCall is a hell of a fighter. I don't think any kind of personal issues or anything are going to weigh into it. But Benavidez' wrestling and his power, I think, make the difference in that fight, just like they did with Johnson versus McCall.
Yeah, and I'll take Benavidez as well. One bit of late breaking news that came up right before we went on the air. Ariel Helwani was talking to Dana White, I would assume at the media scrum for the 156 show. And I'll just read a couple tweets. Dana, they are starting UFC rankings, their own rankings. Wow. 90 media members will vote on the rankings the Monday after this event. Polls will go out and it will begin. And then Dana also said, but regardless of the rankings, I'll put together the fights that people want to see. And then I've kind of been following on Twitter a little bit. Apparently it's going to be an invitation-only thing, but you can apply to the UFC, so I don't really understand. If it's invitation-only, you wouldn't really be applying for it so much as the UFC handpicking guys. But Dana's reasoning for it, and I think it's a great reason, and it's one that I've sort of I want to say that I've championed in the past, is that having rankings, official rankings that they can put on the screen on TV will make it a lot easier for fans to follow divisions and follow the sport, especially those that aren't like Derek and I, or people probably listening to the show who are constantly checking news and probably know almost every guy, if not maybe just 90% of the guys under contract to Zuffa.
It does. It's going to create a lot more opportunities for crying, because if they started out immediately, there's going to be like number 1 John Jones versus not ranked Chael Sonnen. So they can't have it, immediately. They have to. I'm amazed that they have 90 media members that they trust enough and like enough and know of to send out a ballot to. I'm waiting on mine. I'll let you guys know how I fill it out. And, but I think it's cool. And like I said, Dana said, we're gonna do this, but I'm still gonna go ahead and do whatever the hell I want to do, which it's a synthesis of sports and entertainment. It can't simply be number 1 versus number 2 every time out, according to the rankings from the media, because this is kind of an AP and coaches poll deal. There's never going to be an official bracket for it because they're athletes and everybody has subjective opinions about them. It's the best possible scenario, I guess. I hesitate to see how it's going to work out now. The day that one of Ed Soares' fighters gets passed over for a title shot and he takes to the airwaves.
Well, and one thing I forgot who tweeted it, but someone mentioned, and this has sort of been the argument against rankings from the UFC's perspective, is that it allows guys. It gives guys leverage in contract negotiations. If say a John Fitch is trying to negotiate his deal and he's ranked number 5 and someone at number 8 or 9 is for whatever reason making more money than him, he can point to the rankings and say, look, I'm ranked higher than that guy according to your rankings. Why, I want this amount of money.
Yes, and that's gonna, it'll play into contract negotiations, and like I said, public call-outs and things like that. Anytime a fighter tries to call out a higher-ranked fighter, he's gonna say whatever number 7. It's gonna fucking devolve into like the Venture Brothers like henchman scheme where they just give them numbers and that's your rank in the organization. Like what if a higher ranked guy calls out a lower ranked guy? Is he then a piece of shit because he's not trying to move up the ladder? Like how? I mean, there are going to be applications in it that MMA fans are going to take and do stupid things with, and that's my main concern with it.
Yeah. Ultimately, positive or negative?
Positive, because it creates more awareness. It's an extra thing to put on the television that matters, as opposed to our current tally of significant strikes as you're watching significant strikes land. If it's not a live counter and you can't have it updated live, then you shouldn't show it. And if you show it, only do it between rounds. Because then I see the significant strikes are like 63 to 29 and the guy lands 3 bombs and I'm trying to do math in my fucking head while I'm watching the fight. Maybe that's just me.
I think it's an overall positive as well. I think it's just I ultimately think that even if the UFC decided to have their own unilateral rankings that they figured out on their own behind the scenes, I think just having that.
I think that would be worse than nothing. But the fact I want to see this list of distribution for who's getting the ballots.
I mean, that sort of behind the scenes rankings would not be a good look for hardcore fans and media, but I think ultimately for the casual fan to be able to follow the divisions and kind of, being able to bring up guys before a big welterweight title fight or a welterweight co-main and saying, hey, these guys are in this spot right here. They're looking to get into this, pool of talent right above them. I think it's a good thing. One thing, someone retweeted Malkikawa. Damn, okay, media members who get to vote. I just added budget for dinners and lunches. Let's get cracking. Typical Malkikawa.
Hey, like I said, stupid people are going to do stupid things with this, and that's my main concern with anything new with mixed martial arts. And I'm sure it's the UFC's too, which is why they've kind of outsourced it. If it's really 90 people, then you're going to get a nice wide variety of it. I'm waiting for the first dick that tries to rank like Kawajiri or somebody so they can get tossed the fuck out.
Yeah, I imagine
there's going to be top 25 UFC fighters, not top 25 fighters in the world, and there are a rare few that the UFC doesn't have yet, and it'll always be that way, but they'll get them eventually.
Right. Moving on to stuff we plan on talking about. Randy Couture signing a deal with Bellator. The only thing we know for sure is that he'll be involved in the Bellator reality show. I guess there's going to be an official announcement on the 5th of February.
What's he going to do, coach both teams?
No clue. I'm kind of interested to see what his other responsibilities are going to be, if he's going to be someone that they have on their weekly show, whether that's a once every month thing or every week, which with Randy's schedule, I can't imagine he's going to want to do, calling fights or analyzing fights once a week for Bellator. But, what do you think it does for Bellator in terms of their brand? Because, I think it's a good move to kind of create legitimacy for them, and it kind of bolsters their brand. But ultimately, I don't think it's that huge of a deal.
Well, I don't know what else Randy's going to do for him. I mean, they might have him, host the video game awards or something. Like, Spike doesn't really do that much when it comes to athletics and, popular culture. They're kind of their own isolated thing. So I don't think it's going to be that extensive of a deal. We're not going to see his face on television every day. Like I said, with the reality show, I can't imagine who they'd have opposite him that would have even half the cachet with the MMA community. So I think that he's pretty much a loner on that one, which is fine, and I'm sure he's getting paid. But that Lyoto Machida fight, it makes a lot more sense now than it did before, because if you're going to go off with the UFC and they don't trust you, they want to send you off with a loss. And that's what they did with Randy Couture. Otherwise, they could be talking about him fighting King Mo and turning that into a super fight or some stupid shit like that. But now it would be dumb.
Yeah, Dana, according to Helwani on Twitter, Dana said he's happy to never be in business with Randy Couture again. Quote, he's the furthest thing from Captain America, unquote.
Well, I don't read that many comic books, Mike, but how many times did Captain America get married?
I don't know. I'm assuming if he did get married, though, it was to blondes, cute young blondes.
But I'm assuming it was one time, because Captain America, I don't know what religion he is, but he'd have to square it with the church. It'd be a whole mess. He's dead now, right? He did get assassinated.
I believe, but with comic books, you never, There's always
I know.
alternate timelines and guys come back.
But he got shot on the courthouse because he said that he wouldn't did he say he would register with the government? And Iron Man said, "Fuck that, I'm not going to do it."
No, it was the other way around.
Okay. So who shot him?
I forget. It's been a while since I read that series.
I just remember it coming up. I was like, "Oh, what are comic books doing about 9/11?" And it was like, "Oh, Captain America dies."
Yep.
I wonder how they feel about George Bush.
Staying on Bellator, Eddie Alvarez lost his injunction. According to MMA Payout, he lost on two different claims. The first, and this is sort of getting into legalese here, but the first, the court held that Alvarez could not show a reasonable probability of success on the merits. And the second, he could not show irreparable harm. I believe what that means, if I'm kind of skimming over the rest of it.
What it means is we're going to have ourselves a trial.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate meaning. I think the meaning of those phrases, though, the first one being that he failed to prove that the Bellator offer didn't match, at least in terms of the injunction, and then the second being that preventing him from fighting on April 27th in the UFC doesn't do him irreparable harm going forward.
And I take more of an issue with the second than the first, because I think the first can simply be meant to say that we need to have a hearing. We're going to have, the court needs to rule on these questions about whether or not it's a match, what constitutes a match, whether or not they have the capability to do so, if they needed to be an established pay-per-view company, those types of things. We need to figure that out, and you can't prove that those questions have been answered to our satisfaction. The second thing is bullshit, because if that's the GSP Diaz card, then his first fight with the UFC is not going to be that kind of potentially million pay-per-view buy deal where he gets a cut of each of those buys, even though he ain't contributing shit to it. So if he goes from a million card buy to a 300,000 card buy, he might lose $1 million in income.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't comment, obviously about the judge's decision here, but
no, well, what I'm saying is just because when that first part does not mean that they said you're wrong. It means that they said we need to figure that out, and you haven't answered that question here.
Right.
You got to do that before we're going to release you from the contract.
Right. There's a note here at the end, kind of about that second point about the irreparable harm. Furthermore, Alvarez's brief cited two cases in which preliminary injunctions were granted on behalf of professional athletes based on the fact that they would be irreparably injured if they would not be able to pursue their career in the manner in which they saw fit. However, those cases differed, as in each there was an illegal restraint that necessitated the players to be granted an injunction. The court held that Bellator was not imposing an illegal restraint on Alvarez, and he is not precluded from competing professionally if the injunction were not granted. Thus, Alvarez could not prove element 2. So, from the legal perspective, that was the argument that the court gave for not providing the injunction for Alvarez.
Well, I think that what will have to be established in court is the difference between a UFC pay-per-view and a Bellator event, and I don't think that that's ever happened before. So for them to judge in a preliminary matter, a first hearing, where Eddie Alvarez coming in with his hair on fire saying, look, you got to do this right now, or else I'm fucked, they're going to be cautious in that, because I think this case is going to set some precedents.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting.
And I hope Eddie doesn't settle. I hope that if worse comes to worse, they write it out and he just sits out the year and says, fuck you.
Well, and it's interesting, too, kind of following people that know a little bit more about the actual court procedures. There's some people that think that Bellator's got the case wrapped up. There's some people that think Eddie's got a really good argument. So, I'm obviously rooting for Eddie to win because I would rather not see him fight in Bellator anymore. But the actual court proceedings might actually be, if you're interested in that sort of thing, it might be actually pretty interesting. But before we get out of here, Derek, we're going to move on from MMA just for a second. Super Bowl 45 this Sunday, San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens in the Harbaugh Bowl, the Bro Bowl. Who do you got?
The refs, because they can win whatever the fuck they want to. They decide who lives or dies. I picked the refs.
Yeah.
They'll be wearing purple uniforms.
Okay.
I'll go with the Niners because they didn't get there because of the refs, unlike a certain team from Baltimore. I also have a bunch of residual Cleveland hatred. Somebody called them the Rio Browns the other day, and I got very, very pissed at them. Yeah, so fuck Art Modell. I hope somebody pisses on his grave. And and fuck Rick Riley, too. Did you read that story that he wrote?
I heard something about it. What was it?
He wrote a story about how his daughter, his adopted daughter, when she was 11, met her birth mother. And how it was a good experience for him, and she knew where her roots were. You can't change your parents, and how it was good for her. And it was related to Colin Kaepernick, who said that it would be treasonous for him to meet his birth parents after they abandoned him. And, he loves his adopted parents. That's his family. That's the way he feels about it. The blurb that the headline that Riley claims ESPN wrote. He says he doesn't write the headlines, but the headline that ESPN chose to run with the story is the call Kaepernick should make.
That's terrible.
So, yeah. I guess I'll take Rick Riley at his word. If you're just going to write that story about this is what happened to us, it can be a lovely thing. But, if you're not telling Kaepernick what he should do, then why write the story like that?
Yeah, I mean, it is, from what I know, it is...
There is a blurb in the story where he says, he quotes Kaepernick saying it was treasonous, and then the next line is, but it isn't, it's lovely, it's good, something like that.
Yeah, I do know that in bigger media outlets, it is not unusual for the outlet to write the headline and not the actual author of whatever article.
Well, that guy's in trouble because Riley's going to rip his asshole up.
I'm also rooting for the Ravens. I've got a bet on the Ravens. Not the Ravens, the 49ers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fuck our producer.
I was thinking about fuck the Ravens. I do have a bet on the 49ers at -4. I actually already lost a prop bet, Derek.
Over under on how many people are caught being gay on the Super Bowl teams?
No, I had a bet on whether or not Beyonce would admit to lip syncing. I took no at -200. She admitted it.
Of course she was.
I thought she was gonna
go to her grave with it. What was the time limit on that?
I just thought she would, just be like, no comment.
You're stupid.
But
it's Super Bowl week. She's going to be asked that 100 times. So it's a no comment, right? That's just a no comment. So you're no commenting that. You won't say what you did on the day of the Black President's second inauguration. That's a no comment? Yeah. No, dude. Come on. You're dumb.
Sorry. I will. I do have a ton of prop bets for the Super Bowl, though. I'll just go through a couple of them. I took tails at -105, like a normal person would. I've got over 20.5 on the number of times the name Harbaugh will be said during the broadcast.
Oh my God!
Off the whistle.
You could double that.
I've got over 2.5 on how many times during the game will the game be referred to as the Harbaugh Bowl, the Har Bowl, or the Super Bowl.
Also, the Super Bowl should be dragged out and shot.
I agree. I think this is a lock. I took no on -300 on will Alicia Keys add at least one new word to the official U.S. national anthem. I think she's sober enough not to fuck it up like Christina Aguilera did. I took Jim Harbaugh -120 at who will be mentioned more during by full name during the game. Who will the Super Bowl MVP thank first? I took God at 5-2. I figured I should make some money on being angry about something. I have Beyonce having straight hair at -140. I think that's a lock. And then I've got yellow for the Gatorade being dumped on the...
See, this is disgusting. This is what prop bets should not. Prop bets should be fun things that actually have to do with the game. Like, I don't know if you ever listened to Bill Simmons' podcast. He has cousin Sal on there, who was one of Jimmy Kimmel's writers back when he was on Win Ben Stein's Money, and now he is on the show. And he, trolls for prop bets. He does a lot of gambling comments too. But the prop bet of the year last year for the Super Bowl, it was like 8-1 on whether or not Steven Hauschka would have over 4.5 yards. That's a fun prop bet. Or just every fucking play you're praying for them to throw to the fullback just one time.
I think I took that bet a couple years ago on John Kuhn. It was something similar where it was like 14 yards rushing or something stupid. There's a couple more here that I took. I also took clear on the Gatorade bet. I took under 7.5 seconds on how long the post-game handshake hug will last between Jim and John Harbaugh.
Oh God, take the over on that.
I took
Something crying like a baby.
I took the over on 2 minutes 15 seconds on the national anthem. What else did I take here? How many times will Jay-Z be shown on the broadcast? I took the over on a half, so he just needs to show up on TV once, and that's it.
Damn,
I mean,
Mike,
those are the big ones. I have a couple smaller ones too.
Is this like $1 a piece or what?
No, yeah, it's like $2 a piece. And then I have like $5 bets on. Well, I have $5 bets on the coin toss, and then also on the Niners and on the over for the total.
Okay.
So yeah, Erica, if you could hit the music for us, and Derek, give us your closing thoughts.
If tails was minus 105, does that mean heads was also minus 105?
Yes.
Okay, I was about to say, because if one was better than the other and you still bet tails, then you must have a feeling.
Nah, you always bet tails.
Always. Why? Do you always pick tails?
Oh yeah.
I guess.
Derek, you're not playing heads or tails properly.
And it's always sunny shit out of here. I do love the show, though.
All right, see y'all next week.
All right.